Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. As people have taken to social media to voice their thoughts in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, calls have been growing to see his critics punished. We started to see the impacts here in North Carolina. A Carolina Panthers employee was fired for comments about Kirk's death. And now people are asking for a Wake County schools teacher and the Durham Police Chief to also be fired. WRAL's Sean Gallagher and Kirsten Clark have been following both of those cases. Let's start with WRAL's Sean Gallagher. So what did Chief Patrice Andrews post that started to get people's attention in the last couple of days?
Yeah, so she put a post out on Facebook just basically being critical of Charlie Kirk's legacy, and more specifically, the people who she knows in her life who are outwardly supporting him now. But to get more specific, the things that people are upset about what she said were that he disguised himself as a Christian, that he shamed black women like her, believed that gun violence was necessary to preserve the Second Amendment, and also created a culture of divisiveness through hate speech.
Charlie Kirk's podcast was incredibly popular and polarizing. The clips from that show reflect Andrews' feelings. Here's one. The clips from that show reflect Andrews' feelings. Here's one of many where Kirk shared his criticisms of affirmative action.
If I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman, I wonder, is she there because of her excellence, or is she there because of affirmative action? It almost creates thought patterns that are not necessarily wholesome. It creates resentment, doesn't it, Heather? This is not a way to design society.
But it is important to make note here. She was not condoning the violence against him. She was not celebrating his death in any way. She even goes on further to say that she chose to give him empathy at his time of death, but she also said that he didn't believe in that kind of empathy for people like her. So she clearly has some issues with Charlie Kirk and what he represents, and that's something that she's facing a lot of criticism now herself for.
Okay, and who are some of the prominent voices that are calling for her to be ousted from her role as police chief?
Yeah, so mostly the people who are actually calling for her to either be fired or step down are largely, internet comments and, other posts on social media all over the place, because this is largely something that has become nationwide, even though it's just something we're focused on here in Durham. But as far as, officials locally, the Durham County Sheriff, Mike Andrews, and no relation there with the same last name, but he tells me that he's disappointed by it. He said leadership does not lead publicly like this. And then also Representative Brendan Jones, he called it disgusting. So there's a lot of backlash that she's facing because of this post.
Okay. And with that in mind, backlash versus, a policy that a office, or in this case, a government agency might have, obviously are two different things. So does Durham Police have a policy on social media posts by employees? Did she break any rules?
Yeah, so it would be really hard for me to say whether or not she broke these rules. That feels like it's something that's going to have to include lawyers and people much smarter than me. But they do have a policy in place that does explain what their social media policies are. And I think I pulled a couple of quotes from this just because I want to get it right. But in short, people won't be held accountable for posting on their own personal accounts during their own personal time. It's a kind of policy that allows for free speech, but it does say, and this is a quote, employees will be held responsible for the content of their personal social media sites. But I don't really know what that means, to be held responsible. I mean, is that internal discipline? Could it be something up to a firing? It's not clear as far as it's written. But it does also go on to say members should consider the possible adverse consequences that social media content may have on their professional activities. And these are the things that I find really interesting, such as future employment opportunities, credibility as a witness, and public as well as private reputation. All of those things are something that the city manager is going to have to take into consideration as they review this post and determine what they should do or shouldn't do as far as it's concerned with Chief Andrews.
Right. And aside from that, do we have any indication of how Durham leadership feels about this? What has the mayor said?
Yeah, so I spoke with Mayor Leonardo Williams earlier today, and he says he stands firmly in support of Chief Andrews, but he's also fully acknowledging that people in higher positions, himself included, are held to a different standard. He said that he spoke to Chief Andrews on the phone, and he says he told her she didn't say anything wrong, but she has to be aware of the impact her words will have on her. And I think that goes to show, everybody is aware of the First Amendment and their right to free speech. But there are consequences that come with that, whether it's with your job or just your public persona.
Thank you so much, Sean. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about that First Amendment piece of this. WRAL's Kirsten Clark will be joining us. She'll be following the reaction to a post from a Wake County schools teacher, and she also talked to an employment attorney. We're joined now by WRAL's Kirsten Clark, who has been following the reaction to a post from a Wake County schools teacher. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, okay, who made this post and what did it say? Let's start there.
Yeah, so it's a teacher at Millbrook High School, and he's actually been a teacher there since 2018. His name is Idris Abdul Aziz. And funny enough, when I was just out doing my live shot, I ran into one of his students, actually, who said that he was a student, and they call him Mr. A. So just a little tidbit there. But as it relates to this post, I'm not going to read it word for word. There's some pretty strong language in here, some profanity, so I obviously will stay away from that. But it starts by saying Black people stating, quote, RIP for a bigot white supremacist is crazy talk. This dude lived to talk about you and yours. What did he say about Black women again? Let his rot in.
Fill in the blank.
Fill in the blanks. So you kind of just get the gist there, but again, that first line, Black people stating RIP for a bigot white supremacist is crazy talk. And then what did he say about Black women again? So that just kind of gives the gist there, again, without some of that strong language.
Right. And I know that, in your story that aired on Monday, there's a sound bite that you play. I believe Sean played it in his story as well from one of Kirk's podcasts talking about affirmative action and mentioning Black women. So, listeners have a little bit of context about the kind of thing.
Exactly. That was
referencing.
Referenced in this. And I mentioned, too, in that story that, this post is one of that I'm sure many people have seen, kind of reflects a lot of those sentiments and comments that people made after Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. Referencing, as you said, some of those, whether it be from his podcast or from the debates that he did on college campuses.
Right.
Yeah, we did provide some of those comments there.
Right. And so this post, is it still up at this point?
It is not. So that post has since been deleted. And actually, we have not been able to find a trace of Abdulaziz on social media since then. So it seems that he might have just closed his account or other social media accounts altogether.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so how has Wake County Schools reacted to this? Did they give you any kind of statement?
Yeah, so no statement. I actually reached out to, the public information officers with Wake County Public Schools, as well as individually. I sent an email to each board member there. Did not hear back from them. I did hear back from that spokesperson, the PIO that I reached out to, saying that they were actually forbidden from speaking on an individual matter when it comes to an employee because of state law. So they would not comment specifically on the post and anything related to that. I will say, however, though, I did follow up with that, just asking in general, if employees or whoever it may be has questions about how they should approach social media, especially during these times when, there's just a lot going on and you're seeing a lot of people take to social media to express how they feel and their opinions. I was provided with the 2025-2026 Wake County Public Schools social media guidelines, and that was essentially a long list of how they suggest employees should approach social media.
Gotcha. And those suggestions, what are kind of the top notes of that?
Yeah, so there was a lot of it that don't really apply to this case, and as it relates to, how employees should or should not mostly interact with students over social media. But there was one section of this that did apply and really stood out to me about when teachers or employees are discussing what may be offensive or inappropriate matters on social media. And it really said that, first of all, they expect teachers, I keep saying teacher, excuse me, employees, to represent the school system at all times, but that they could be held accountable for any offensive or inappropriate comments that they make on social media, and there could be disciplinary actions to follow.
Okay. And at this point, we just don't know if Wake County Schools is going to do that.
Exactly. We reached out, and Wake County Public Schools said Idris Abdulaziz is still actively employed in the school system.
All right. And, for this story, I thought it was really interesting that you did talk to an employment attorney and kind of get some insight here.
Mm-hmm.
So at a base level, can employers fire someone for what they post?
So the broad answer to that is yes.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's kind of broken up a little bit into you have private employers and you have public employers. So I spoke with Laura Noble. She's an employment lawyer here in North Carolina. And so she explained to me that, first of all, North Carolina is an at-will state. So that essentially means that an employer can discharge an employee at the will of the employer for any reason or no reason at all. But when it comes to public employees, which in this case, Idris Abdulaziz is a public employee because he's an employee of the Wake County Public School System. They have more protections than someone who is a private employee. So a private employer can, again, have a easier basis of firing someone, again, for almost whatever reason they feel necessary. But when it comes to someone who has a public employer, you're protected by the Constitution, by the First Amendment right of free speech, and those things have to be considered when it comes to deciding whether or not someone should be terminated.
Okay. Yeah, definitely important distinction there. And, and in both of the cases that we've talked about today, teacher, police chief, those would be considered public employees. So makes these cases a little bit different, and we'll just have to see where things go from here.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to add to, I also spoke with Adam Goldstein. He's with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, also known as FIRE. And he mentioned something that really stuck with me when we talked about this, and he really echoed those sentiments about, a public employee having their right to free speech and really not, public employers not having the right to really infringe upon that. But he said, we sometimes have to encounter speech that we don't like or that makes us uncomfortable, and that's the price of being in a free society, right? And so when you're seeing people call for this teacher to be terminated, he mentioned that, he can see why, the other side of this, why parents may have concerns with the post, and, why they feel like, as this is my student's teacher, I don't necessarily want him posting things like this. But at the same time, just because you feel it's offensive or inappropriate or you disagree with it doesn't mean that this person still is protected by certain rights.
All right. Good food for thought for us all to think about. Thank you so much, Kirsten. We appreciate it. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with triangled news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. You can sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.